This right here is the mess. When I first played Diablo back in late winter of 1997, I was struggling to get through this dungeon, fighting everything with this warrior character. And then all of a sudden I got to this closed off room in the middle of another room, and I open the door and this big red bastard comes out and just slays me. I was horrified, but at the same time I kept wanting to play it, so I did. Anyways, this game means a lot to me. It remains one of my favorite games to play through to this day. Every now and then I'll feel the need to run through it again after about a year or so. This has to be a sign that the game's good, right? Or at least I like it enough to do that. Thing is, I don't even know where to start with this, but I guess the best place to start is the beginning. And this game kind of has a unique origin story in a way. So let's get to it. Sometime in 1993, three guys started a company called Condor: Max and Eric Schaefer, who were brothers, and David Brevik. And Condor started out doing contract work, making versions of games for consoles, such as NFL Quarterback Club and Justice League Task Force, which is kind of weird. It was made during that era when Superman had a mullet and he looked kind of funny. But what they really wanted to do was make computer games. After they built up enough funds and confidence, they wanted to pitch an original game to somebody to help with publishing. That game turned out to be Diablo.
From the depths of Hades, an evil arises to corrupt the living. It brings pain and death to all that it touches. It murdered your family and destroyed your village. Now you must enter into its lair on a dark mission of vengeance. Good luck.
Initially, the concept for this game involved being a traditional turn-based RPG with roguelike elements, main influences being Rogue and NetHack. Brevik wanted the game to have expansions, sort of like booster packs for Magic the Gathering. They would each cost $5 and they'd have their own names and stuff. It was an interesting, if odd, idea for the time, but it kind of reminds you of the current DLC landscape going on right now today. And the game would also feature permadeath, an aspect that Rogue and roguelikes usually have, along with claymation-inspired art style similar to Primal Rage. The permadeath idea would return in Diablo 2. That would be the hardcore character feature there, where if you're playing and you got killed, that character was just shot. You couldn't play it anymore. You lost everything. Condor had a lot of thought and ideas put into this. They just needed somebody else to take care of the rest. A chance meeting with an unspecified Blizzard employee at a trade show in Las Vegas in '94 changed all that. It turned out they were showing off their own Super Nintendo version of Justice League Task Force. Back then, Blizzard was still working on console games on the side. Schaefer and Brevik struck up a conversation with this guy. He was telling them about a pre-alpha version of the game they'd been working on called Warcraft. Something I'm sure that is a footnote in gaming history. This Blizzard employee, they were telling Eric and David they were looking for more PC developers to expand their team, and the two of them informed this Blizzard guy that they had an idea for a game, and told him to come take a look at what they had. Eventually this guy came up to their studio and they pitched Diablo to Blizzard, and they loved it. According to Bill Roper, who I am assuming is the guy they met, he went over to Condor to take a look at this. And this is around the time when Blizzard bought Condor and started calling them Blizzard North. They told him this game was a mix of Rogue, Moria, NetHack, Crusader, No Remorse, and Doom. And that's a tall order in aiming your sights high when you're developing like your first original game. During the process, after Blizzard acquired Condor, they liked what they'd seen of the game, but they asked what it would be like if the game were real-time instead of turn-based like how Condor was making it. At first, Condor told them no, it's staying turn-based, and Blizzard was fine with that. And later on, though, Eric and David got to an argument about whether or not they should change it, And finally, David caved in, cooked up a quick and dirty version of the game, showing what it would be like in real time, and they actually liked it a lot better and went ahead with that. After all the development mess was sorted out, everything moved forward at a more steady and consistent pace, with the exception of Blizzard wanting Blizzard North to implement BattleNet and multiplayer into the game, which was a pretty big deal and something I'll get into a little bit later here. They also developed CG cutscenes to help out with the story, but some were dropped due to time constraints, and the remnants of these cutscenes exist still. But there was more dropped during the game's development than that. Certain quests and characters got dropped too. There was a quest that involved you talking to Jillian about clearing out a cellar full of pests in the house that you start out in the town. There were also fairly major quests dropped too, such as killing Flesh Doom, the wielder of Shadowfang, a legendary sword forged in the pits of hell. This questline involved a character that would supposedly show up every once in a while in the town called Tremaine the Priest. He's the one that would inform you of the demon and presumably the backstory of the sword. What was supposed to happen was you would eventually kill the demon, retrieve the sword, bring it to the priest, and he was supposed to purge it of magic or destroy it somehow, and the process would backfire and he would get killed by its power or something, which is kind of a bummer way to end a quest, I suppose, so that might be why they dropped the quest from the game. Another pretty major one was the map of stars. There's data remnants of this in the game, and some people were even able to duplicate the actual item and just distribute it in multiplayer. This quest was time-based, and it somehow prevented Diablo from gaining power from the stars aligning in a specific way. But if you fucked off and failed for too long, then Diablo would grow stronger and actually be more difficult to fight at the end. Blizzard North stated that this quest was removed from the game because it changed the way you played Diablo, and I suppose they didn't want a time-sensitive quest interfering with the overall feeling of cautious dungeon exploration. It does kind of clash a little bit. A lot of people had criticized this game back when it came out for being light on story and for being part RPG, and, well, I don't really agree with that. In fact, people praised the hell, pun, out of Diablo 2 and ignored the fact that the story is pretty much presented and told the same way it is in the first game, only with a few more of Blizzard's then famous CG cutscenes. Alright, so here's the story. King Leoric of the Kingdom of Kandurus ruled near Tristram. He was considered a pretty cool guy until he started to be driven mad by a mysterious force, Satan. His youngest son, Prince Albrecht, went missing, and that caused him to go over the edge. He sent his men out into the town to slaughter people, thinking they abducted him, and eventually his own men turned on him, got tired of these ridiculous orders, and they killed him. Leoric was buried underneath the cathedral. You go into town, and that's when all the weird troubles started. Strange noises in the night, weird creatures coming out, all that stuff. A guy who served under the king, Archbishop Lazarus, said he knew Albrecht was being held underneath the cathedral, and he whipped a bunch of townspeople into a mob, and they stormed the place. Among those guys were Farnham and Griswold. This ended horribly, and it only seems like they and Wirt survived, as there doesn't seem to be any other survivors left. This is where your character comes in. A lot more of the backstory for the game and the world building are actually contained in the manual for the game. And this is kind of important because back then, PC game manuals were integral for getting further story across for the game and more world building stuff. PC game manuals were more fluff material rather than just instruction manuals on how to play the game, even more so than what console game manuals were like back then. If you lament the days of console game manuals passing us by and only getting a piece of paper with instructions on it, if you're lucky, you really had no idea what you were missing out on when it came to, PC game manuals. Sheesh. Now, The whole game is pretty much confined to this little town here in the cathedral, or the dungeon, so to speak. And you're going to interact with the people that live in the town quite a bit, and you're not really going to interact with anybody else. So there's a cast of characters here that kind of help you out and give you information, give you quests, sell you stuff. Cain the Elder, who appears in other Diablo games. He also sounds a little bit like Sean Connery, vaguely.
The story of Wirt is a frightening and tragic one. He was taken from the arms of his mother and dragged into the labyrinth by the small, foul demons that wield wicked spears.
You got Griswold the blacksmith, Ogden the innkeeper, Jillian the barmaid who works for Ogden, Pepin the healer. This seems like a very skittish, hypochondriac kind of guy. It's kind of interesting. Farnham the drunk, one of the guys who survived the charge into the cathedral, but he didn't come out all that great for it. Wirt the peg leg boy, he's some little rapscallion punk who sells you fancy shit and charges you just to look at it. Sometimes he has good items, but very rarely are they like practical or worth getting due to the amount of gold he wants for them. And you've also got Adria the witch, who lives at the edge of town. She sells magic potions and books to learn spells and scrolls, you know, witch shit. So she's not Stevie Nicks, but you know, hey, it is what it is.
Yep, that's a cow, all right.
What's kind of interesting, though, about all these characters living in the town and the setup of this is that it does kind of give you a feeling that you're living, or at least staying, in a small town, and everybody kind of knows everybody else. And there's a feature when you talk to all these characters called gossip, and each character just talks about random stuff. It could be about stuff that happened in the past, or they'll talk about somebody else that lives here, they'll talk shit, or they'll worry about somebody, or just random things, anecdotes, whatever. But some of my favorite characters to talk to, or at least one of them, is Farnham, because he's got some pretty hilarious stuff.
Can't a fellow drink in peace? Why don't that old crone do something for a change? Sure, she's got stuff. Well, you listen to me. She's unnatural. I ain't never seen her eat or drink, and you can't trust somebody who doesn't drink at least a little.
Also, Cain's interesting to talk to because he knows a lot of history and backstory stuff, so you're into that nerdy shit. You talk to Cain too.
The Gateway of Blood and the Halls of Fire are landmarks of mystic origin. Wherever this book you read from resides, it is surely a place of great power.
But they'll also help you out with quest stuff sometimes. If you go up to one of these characters and you go to talk to them, you have an option to talk with them about what you're trying to accomplish right now. Sometimes it can be helpful, and sometimes not so much.
Big Cleaver killing all my friends. Couldn't stop him. Had to run away. Couldn't save them. Trapped in a room with so many bodies. So many friends. No!
Really, the ending to this game is kind of weird and brutal in a way. You finally beat Diablo, and then you take the soul stone out of his skull, and then what happens is your character looks at it, and then he shoves it into his skull, and he screams, and it ends on kind of a bummer note because you have a Satan in your head and you don't know what to do. And that's kind of a weird situation. You know, Satan is with you now. Hail Satan.
Hail Satan!
Hail Satan!
Satan is his father, and his name is Adrian. He shall overthrow the mighty and lay waste their temples. He shall redeem the despised and wreak vengeance in the name of the burned and the tortured. Hail Adrian! Hail Adrian! Hail Satan! Hail Satan!
Alright, here we go. We're getting down to the meat and potatoes here, the gameplay. And originally, like I talked about earlier, this was intended to be a turn-based RPG. And back when this game was in development, that was more of the go-to for RPG-style games on PC. And really, I can't imagine what the game would have been like after years of playing it, how it ended up. Diablo really helped to push the idea of real-time action RPGs. And of course, because of Diablo's runaway success, it incurred dozens of copycat games. Stuff like Dungeon Siege, things like that. You know what, speaking of copycats, when I've been doing research for this game, just looking at other videos and stuff, I see comments and stuff from people that go like, oh duh, does this remind anybody of Baldur's Gate? Well, this game predates Baldur's Gate by nearly 2 years, so fuck you. Also, they're not even that similar, so like, what... Whatever.
Boys, you gotta talk about blood. What about flowers and sunshine? And that pretty girl that brings the drinks. Listen here, friend. You're obsessive, you know that?
So basically, when you start this game, you got 3 classes to pick from, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, you know all that jazz. Warrior, Rogue, Sorcerer. Warrior's good at melee combat, has a weak magic stat, and can only learn so many spells. Rogue is the most balanced out of the 3 classes, but excels at, range combat, pretty decent with magic. And Sorcerer is great with magic, can cast spells really fast, but is terrible at melee combat and has the lowest HP. It kind of makes him the hardest character to play in the game, but just like in D&D and tabletop stuff, in the later part of the game, spellcasters get really powerful. This game kind of innovated the point-and-click real-time combat. It sounds and looks pretty simplistic, but the enemies act very differently from one another, and you'd have to develop strategies to kind of deal with them, like the little fallen one guys. When you kill one and there's a group of them, they all scatter and run away like cowards, so you have to go hunt them down. Zombies are super slow, and you can pick them off pretty easily. The goatmen are usually kind of tougher. They'll come and fight you or retreat, or like if they have bows, they'll stand in the back and try to shoot you, and they'll run away if you try to approach them. Little things like that just kind of make fighting the enemies interesting, and if they didn't have these little nuances to them, combat would get really samey and boring. And when you kill guys, you get gold and items as you're going through the dungeon. Eventually you level up, and when you do level up, you get 5 stat points each level, and you can distribute them in whatever attributes you want. Some items require more strength and dexterity, so you may want to put some points into those. Magic from books or using scrolls, you want to put more of stats into your magic stat. As you learn the basics, you'll eventually get into a groove of going down, killing a bunch of stuff, finishing quests, and then your inventory fills up and you go home and sell a bunch of garbage to Griswold or Adria. Identify items, buy potions, see if that little fucker Wirt has anything worthwhile and get pissed off because he doesn't. Go back down to the desecrated church, the musty catacombs, the weirdly hot cave, or hell, to be with your buddies. If there's any negatives in this game I can think of, there's really just a couple. Kind of sucks that there's no way to move any faster, especially after you play Diablo 2. But it doesn't really bother me. I like to think that this game has a more methodical, thought-out pace to it. And then there's also the fact that sometimes you can find items that have negative effects, like they'll lower your strength, or you'll find a weapon that does less damage than normal. Really, it just seems kind of cruel after you do all the work from killing all these demons and then you get like a shitty item like this, like it's cursed or something. I was going to have a little segment on here about Battle.net, but I can't really get it to work anymore. And nobody seems to be able to know why it doesn't work anymore either, so moving on. One thing that really adds to the value of this game, though, is the randomly generated dungeons and quests. Each time you play this game, The layout of the cathedral and everything beneath it, the locations of the monsters, the chests, the sarcophagi, the shrines, all that stuff is different each time you play the game. It doesn't matter with which character class or anything, it's just going to be different. And the other thing that adds to the value here is the quests. Sometimes you'll play and you'll fight the butcher, and then sometimes you'll start a new game and you don't fight the butcher at all, maybe. Or you don't find that wounded townsman, at least, and he gives you the quest. You could maybe fight King Leoric, the Skeleton King, or you might go into the underground well and clear it of poison. There's several quests in this game, and there's no way you'll do them all in one playthrough. You have to play through it multiple times if you want to see all the quests. And to me, that adds more value to a game that I already think is pretty good. Now we get down to the sights and sounds here. Graphically, I think Diablo's aged fairly well. It kind of maintains its own sense of style and looks nostalgic enough without bordering on being outdated due to some of the techniques and graphical effects used here. It still kind of looks like they tried to shoot for that whole claymation thing, but it kind of reminds me more of like a pre-rendered kind of look. Sort of similar to what Donkey Kong Country has going on. What I like most about the graphics in this game, though, are the backdrops. They all look kind of gritty and a little bit surreal in a way. The cathedral's got some cool touches to it, where there's like blood seeping out of parts of the wall, and there's loose stones. It looks kind of ruined and really old. The catacombs are very dark and dingy. You almost smell the must in the air. The caves are probably the blandest part of the game. There's really nothing going on there. And then there's like weird tile sets, like when you first get to the caves, they're like brown, and then they turn teal or blue. It's very strange. But Hell looks cool, and honestly, Hell, this game has my favorite depiction of Hell because it's really dark, and there's a lot of like horrible things you see. Like there's people impaled, like Vlad the Impaler style, and there's people hanging from hooks and shit, and it's ridiculous. The sound design, and especially the soundtrack for Diablo, are perfect. They fit like a glove. You've got nice and crisp, clean sound effects along with brutal, crunchy, bloody ones. It makes the combat feel real dangerous and surreal. The magic especially has some great sounds, making it feel like you're wielding some serious death. Big ticker here for me is the soundtrack. I just really love the soundtrack for this game. It only has like 4 songs, 4 or 5, but they're all done really well, and they really help reinforce the atmosphere this game kind of has. This first Diablo game has like a more of a dark, almost a real small tinge of like a survival horror kind of atmosphere, and the music really helps drive that home. The music was done by Matt Uelman, who stayed on with Blizzard for a while. He made the music for Diablo 2, and he even contributed some tracks to World of Warcraft as well, and the Burning Crusade expansion. If there's anything else bad to address about this game, it's just issues you might have playing it on modern machines. Sometimes the game just won't work, it'll just crash, or if you do get it to work, the picture's messed up, like the resolution's real small, or it's out of whack, or the colors might even be messed up. If you just do a Google search, though, and kind of look into it, you'll figure out how to fix it. Other than a real quick fix, Diablo works well on modern machines, like most other Blizzard games do. There's also a PlayStation port. Alternatively, if you want to do that, it's a solid port, and it has some nice touches to it, like lighting effects and stuff like that. But it has its own little problems and caveats to it. The game infamously takes up like 10 blocks of a PS1 memory card, which is like 10 out of 15 blocks. It's going to take up the majority of memory card when you do a save file for that game. And it's also kind of pricey nowadays. It tends to float around $50 or $60 for a complete copy. So, you may want to try to stick with PC if you're trying to save money or something. Unless Blizzard offers it for cheaper later or whatever.
Yep, that's a cow, all right.
You know, all that aside though, all the negatives and positives or mixed things, this is one of my favorite games to play. It still is. I love the atmosphere. I love the gameplay in it. It's addictive. It's as addictive as Diablo 2 is, or 3 even, just in a different kind of way to me. I always enjoy playing this one a little bit more than the other two, but that's just me.
I can't carry anymore.
But with that said, I enjoyed really talking about one of my favorite games ever, as usual. I hope you did.
Too much baggage.
So, later.
The Soul Stone burns with hellfire as an eerie red glow blurs your vision. Fresh blood flows into your eyes, and you begin to hear the tormented whispers of the damned. You have done what you knew must be done. The essence of Diablo is contained. For now. You pray that you have become strong enough to contain the demon and keep him at bay. Although you have been fortified by your quest, you can still feel him, clawing his way up from the dark recesses of your soul. Fighting to retain control, your thoughts turn toward the ancient mystic lands of the Far East. Perhaps there, beyond the desolate wastes of Aranok, you will find an answer. Or perhaps, salvation.
Alright, thanks for watching this video. This has been one I've been wanting to do for a long time. Hope you guys liked it. I've got more videos coming down the pike here. I've got a new relevant stuff coming up on Super Metroid. It's not quite ready yet, but it'll be out after a little bit longer. And as for anything else, there's a Spider-Man Web of Fire video I did a little while back. If you want to check that out, give it a whirl. Thanks.